Hi, everybody. It's great to have you with us for this Friday. Today, I'm Jessica Moore with the Customer and Partner Success Manager at Inflectra, and we are delighted to have with us today Paul Merrill. Paul is the founder, CEO, and test automation consultant at Beaufort Fairmont Automated Testing Services. He has 17 years of experience implementing solutions for a wide range of industries, from healthcare to advertising to mobile. Paul spends his time working to accelerate test automation and agile teams. Paul also co-hosts Reflection as a Service, a podcast about software engineering and entrepreneurship, and conducts regular webinars on automated testing. Paul, welcome.
Hey, thanks. And I got to get that bio updated. It's been a long time. Reflection as a Service was like 4 years ago, but it was a good podcast. Go look it up.
Well, perfect. That's a great way to plug it here. Paul, could you tell us a fun fact about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I coach a kids soccer team. One of my kids is on a soccer team, and so that's tons of fun. That's one fun fact. Another not so fun fact is that I have plantar fasciitis, which I had no idea what it was, but my foot hurts a lot all the time, and it's getting better. So there are two facts. Hopefully one of them's fun.
Getting better is great. I mean, that's the right direction.
Yeah,
Are your
absolutely.
kids playing soccer now, even with sports restrictions?
So I'm in North Carolina, and so every state has different restrictions and every state has different needs and that kind of stuff. So here the governor has deemed it okay for us to get together a little bit every once in a while. So what we've done with that organization is with the YMCA here, and the organizers have done a wonderful job at trying to make sure that we have social distancing as well as masks and those types of things to keep everybody healthy. We do temperature checks when we check in. We make sure that if you have any, you do self checks before you come, and then it's just one team at a time doing work together. So we're not exposing lots of different people to different things. Parents, when they're there, are spread far apart, lots of things like that to try to keep everything safe. But the look on these kids' face when they came that first day and they've been isolated forever, I mean, they were ready to blow up, just explode. They were so excited. So it's
I bet there was a lot of energy on the pitch that day.
There was, absolutely, absolutely.
Great. Okay. And of course, we have our awesome Adam Sandman, who's with us again today. Adam has been a programmer since the age of 10. He's been working in the IT industry for 20 years. He's currently the Director of Technology at Inflectra Corporation, and he is interested in technology, business, and innovation. And for your cajillionth fun fact, Adam, what do you have for us today?
Well, I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel this time. But actually, this one came about because someone had asked me about hygiene. Those who are frequent watchers will know I often wear a black vest. And people have asked me, well, how do you keep it so clean? Well, I actually have 4 of these vests. And so whenever one gets damaged or torn, I go on Joseph A. Bank and I buy another one. I go to my cart, and same with the colored shirts. I actually have an Amazon buy it again option on all the colored shirts I have. So I completely standardized my wardrobe. It's so the stress is it relieves is amazing. I need a shirt. Oh, Amazon, pick the color, buy 2, send. You know, it's great. And with the COVID, it's been great. So my fun fact is I've got a completely standardized wardrobe that I can now buy on demand on Amazon and Joseph A. Bank and Macy's.com.
Nice. The Inflectra uniform.
That's right.
Nice. Great. Well, let's dive in. Let's see, I'm going to start with something that is a little COVID related, since we were just talking about COVID and soccer. Belinda Goodman. Hi, Belinda. Is there something that every tester should be doing during COVID-19 that maybe we are not doing? Adam, you want to start?
Every tester doing, okay. We've talked a little bit about some of this in previous sessions where we talked about the career aspect, which was and like a few months ago, the economy was not in such good shape after the initial first waves of the virus. So what I think we talked about was honing your craft, volunteering to help out people who needed testing that maybe couldn't afford to hire testers to keep in the industry if you were out of employment. But things seem to be a lot better these days in terms of employment. So I think for testers, it's probably about looking at the next thing, looking at how you can support organizations that have to make that move to a more online platform, like school districts that have struggled with trying to be online. And I think potentially looking at types of testing that maybe you didn't think of before. So are we going to see more virtual reality? Are we going to see more gamification? So the reason I bring this one up is we're doing a lot of software testing conferences, and I think a lot of the organizers are trying to make these online events more fun. Fun needs to be part of it because it needs to be engaging. And so a lot of the newer conferences and online collaboration platforms have a fun element. And as testers, is it usable? Is it functional? Is it fast? Is it secure? But maybe it's also, is it fun? Like, how do you test the gamification of an idea of a platform so people actually choose to use it rather than watching YouTube videos? Because a market reality is going to be, unless you can make your platform fun, people may not use it.
Great.
Yeah, I think some platforms have really figured that out. So like Test Automation U, where I was going to mention I have a course out there on it, but that's a wonderful place, and they've got a lot of gamification there as well. So some folks have figured it out, but I'm with you. I think within conferences and ways that conference organizers can use that, maybe there's a way to like get badges for going to different online events or something. I would love to see something like that was gamified learning.
I know that for Star West, they're doing, what's it called? Not Playground. There's a game where it's like a video game, and they're going to have the whole conference be this giant, like Minecraft-like video game.
Oh, that's
What
awesome.
it's called? Next Neighborhood. There's a name of a platform they've actually got, but it's literally, you're going to really go to a virtual bar, and you can go, and if you get close to someone, it's going to pop up and actually a live video stream, like you bumped into them. And that's going to be in like 3 weeks' time. So I'm giving a shout out to the Star West guys. That's amazing. Like, wow, that's really cool.
It seems like there'd be a great name for that. Like use maybe the star part and then the craft part, StarCraft for that game or something. Maybe.
Yeah, I forget what it's called.
See, I have all the dad jokes now. I can't. I don't have good jokes. I have dad jokes at this point in my life.
There's not a bad dad joke, so keep them coming.
I've heard there's not a good dad joke, actually.
Well, that's true.
That's really interesting. I would imagine that perhaps that platform was out there before, but because so many conferences were live, we may not have been as tuned into online conference platforms. So I wonder how quickly some of these have come about in the last.
Some of these, I think, also were platforms being used by kids who, like some of these were collaboration for gamers, and so I think some of these they've co-opted into the conferencing and the business space. Like I know we're using for our conference, a shout out in 2 weeks to Inflectra. We were looking at like how do we do collaboration, and we looked at things like Slack and Teams and Meet and all these other very corporate. And we're like, oh, we use this every day. So we've actually gone with Discord, which is what my kids use for talking to their friends when they're playing video games. And you can do a lot of things at once. It's got voice and chat. It's a bit more fluid. It's just more fun. And we've noticed that we like using it more than, say, our company's standard messaging because of that funness. So we're hoping that it will make people want to use it more. So I think people need to look outside the corporate space and look up what your kids use. Like every technology is your kids use it first, like TikTok, and then it becomes the next thing that we'll be using in business.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
This is a shout out to Thomas. Hi, Thomas. We have a few listeners who are with us week in and week out. We talk a lot about Arlene and Violetta, and thanks guys for being here. It's Arlene and Violetta. It's great to have you again. Thomas is also here quite a bit. So, hey, Thomas, thanks for coming again today. And he's got a question. Paul, many who are listening may not know what AST is. Could you tell us about AST and your participation in CAST?
Yeah, so that sounds a little bit promotional. It sounds like somebody who's involved in AST, and that's fine. AST is the Association for Software Testing, and I've been a member over time, a year here or there. They have a lot of great resources in a lot of different ways. I believe they have a newsletter, if I remember. They have a Slack channel that's great. So this is an international group that organizes a conference every year. They organize a number of different things, and really my understanding of their mission, and I'm not on the board, I don't know, I know other folks who have been on the board. The big thing is that they're trying to help testers get better with testing. That's the main thing. So if you're looking for kind of what Adam was saying here, places to go and find resources for testing, AST is terrific with that. The membership is worth its weight, and the conference is terrific. So I went last year to the first conference that I've been to for CAST. I'd heard for many years about CAST conferences. Every year in August, I would look for my Twitter and I'd see CAST all over the place. And what's going on at CAST? And it was always the very best practitioners that I knew of. Like maybe they had a name in the industry, but you knew they were just good at what they did. And those were the people that were there. And so I wanted to go, and I had the opportunity to go last year. We sponsored it, and also I was fortunate enough to get through the call for papers and speak at it. And they really just have a different view of testing, and they're looking for new ways to do testing. It's one of the higher, that conference I look at as being one of the higher, maybe the deeper testing, especially it's not all automation, it's not all tooling, it's really about that individual hands-on tester and what are the tools that they're gonna use and learn.
And if someone was asking to you, I want to go to a conference, and there's the STAR conferences, there's the STP cons, there's CAST. What distinguishes them in a way that you might tell, if you want this, go to this one, you want this, go to that one? What's sort of a distinguishing feature?
That's a great question. I'm sure you could answer that your own way, but you're asking so.
Well, I haven't been to CAST. I've only been to STPCon and STAR.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I've been to a number of these so far. One that I haven't been to yet that I'd love to go to is the Ministry of Test Bash. At some point, I would love to do that. And there are a couple others. I haven't been to the Pacific Northwest one. I would love to do that one. The regional conferences, what I see with the regional nonprofit conferences. So we have one here in the Research Triangle called the Triangle Software Quality Association Conference, and we do that every 2 years. We did it this past February, right before COVID hit. It went off really, really great. We had volunteers that worked together for a year before that to put it together, volunteers, and they were absolutely phenomenal at putting it on. We had over 400 people. We had lots of the major names in the conference there. A really great, very varied group of people giving talks and sharing their knowledge and their experience. So it was wonderful. But the regional ones like TISCA, things like the Pacific Northwest, the one in Ohio, I forget, QA or the Highway, and a couple of those others. What you get there, you usually get a lot of the local folks. So people who are local to that area, they have great ideas. Maybe they haven't spoken at a conference yet. And you really get some amazing gems out of that. People who they should be speaking, they should be sharing what they know. They go in and they do that one first before they speak anywhere else. So you can really get some amazing stuff. You can get some things that are more specific to the industries that are in that area. So in Ohio, you had more of the banking and more of the insurance type thing. In our area, you had different technologies here. So that's those. Star West, Star East, the TechWell conferences. TechWell puts on an amazing conference. They have the biggest conferences in testing that you'll go to. They have the biggest opportunity to find vendors that you can work with. And this is a dirty word to a lot of people. It's not to me, but it's a dirty word to a lot of people. The idea of vendors being somewhere and it being commercialized. Well, how do you think they pay for these conferences, right? Like they have that. The reason you don't pay quite as much, and in some cases a lot less, is because you bring in these vendors, and the vendors are wonderful at bringing in other people. They're wonderful at bringing in other ideas. Many times the speakers at conferences are from the vendors, and the vendors many times have practitioners who are out there every single day seeing what's in the real world. So they bring a really important part to our ecology of testing. But so Star West has I would say it is more commercialized, right? And then you have STPCon, which has some wonderful speakers. It's been one of the top conferences out there for many years. And I'll be speaking at that in a few weeks and maybe next week, I'm not sure, virtual. But STPCon is one of my favorites. I love it. So that's how I would differentiate. You got to ask me questions that I can't talk as long or have me drink less of this stuff. Okay.
No, we love a good in-depth answer. So
it's Friday afternoon, exactly.
Yeah, keep it coming. You've got your bottle next to you, so we can refill, right?
Yeah, well, if we refill, we're going to be in serious trouble. That's big trouble. Yeah.
That's okay. It's been a couple of weeks, so
Okay.
if we need to throw a few back today, we can do it. Adam, what about you? What are some of your favorite conferences?
Oh, it's interesting. The European ones are kind of fun because they usually have a higher production value in some ways than the American one. The American ones are very, it's like you go to a hotel, it's very matter of fact. It's good, you meet good people. But the Europeans, they don't do as many of them. Like Eurostar, I went to Agile Testing Days. I mean, they're just a little bit more fun and edgy, which I kind of like. Like, so UK Star was in London, and Eurostar was in Prague, and they rent out a cathedral with all these chandeliers in Prague, which is just amazing. You just don't have access to that so much here. And Agile Testing Days is in Germany. It's like there's like an 80s disco. I mean, it's supposed to be work and a conference, but man, I mean, it's like partying and having some work on the side. So it's a bit more of a let loose vibe, I think, over there. And they're like, oh, we forgot to bring the board games, but we got the whiskey, so it's all good. It's very much just that joy de vivre, which I like in the European ones. Of the American ones, SDP I like because it's a different place every year, so you get to meet some local people, because half their audience is local, I think half travel. So the good thing is, even though it is the same event, it picks up a lot of local people wherever it's being held, and the speakers are really good. And I like the organizers; they're just great people. And then TechWell is great because for us as a vendor, we want to know what people are doing. We want to know what other vendors are doing, because we want to make sure that we're building the right tools for people. And how do we find out? Obviously, we talk to our customers, but we'd like to know what the people who aren't yet our customers need. And that's how vendors get better and build the things that people need, rather than pushing stuff on people that they don't need. So I think technical ones are really good for us to get a gauge on where the market is going and learn what can we help you do next year, but we won't know about unless we talk to you. So that I think is really good, and they do a good job helping the break down that vendor kind of attendee barrier that some other conferences don't do a good job of.
Yeah, and the stars are big, but from a vendor perspective, being in the booth, it's great to be able to go talk to the other vendors. We've made a lot of good friends in the booths. In fact, just last week we had Kat and Jane from Sauce Labs, who we've gotten to know from conference after conference after conference. Talking to they were doing Tipsy Testing last week. Yep.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like Kat a lot. I don't know if and I like James. I was trying to think who you were talking about, and it just occurred to me.
Yep.
Yeah, they're great. And Sauce Labs does so many good things for the testing community, along with a lot of companies like Inflectra and others. So it's nice to have good corporate partners there that support the community and do good things. So.
Yep. Absolutely. Looking to the future, what do you see as the next major change, Paul?
I wish I had a crystal ball. Let me look at my crystal ball.
Presumably in testing, I mean, rather than the economy, or both?
It doesn't specify. So I would say it's Friday afternoon. We all have drinks. Interpret this as you will. I suspect it's more testing based, but I would say take it anywhere you want.
Yeah, I don't really know. I would have to think about that some. I mean, I certainly for a long time I've kind of had this attitude about AI and testing, that this feeling that it was just overblown, that the hype was just bigger. And tell me your thoughts about this too, Adam. But it's just looked like it was just overhyped. And I would go and talk to vendors and try to understand what was going on. I sat, people always want to do product demos for me, and they want me to give them what I think about them. And I appreciate the sentiment behind it. It's very kind. But so many of the products, there are so many products out there and so many products that do different things. With the AI thing, it looked like in order to get VC, you just had to put AI in the name and you would get VC for the last 2 or 3 years. So I think there are things coming up on the horizon with the AI. I think that we're not quite there yet, but I hear the vendors talking about things that are more exciting. So, and I think the real place for AI in testing is about test automation and kind of replacing the action of doing test automation. And I hate to say that as a test automation guy, but I think that's where some action can happen. I think there are 2 or 3 other areas where AI can help. One would be, once you can get a really clear, uniform set of data within an environment. So data from how requirements are created or stories are created, data about how they move along the chain until it gets all the way out into deployment. When you have all of that data at hand and you can see it for multiple different companies, you can start doing some really cool things, some really cool predictions about stuff. And I imagine some of them will end up being things we already know, like don't release on a Friday, right? Things like that. Don't give code to John, whoever John is. John's just not good with deployments, and don't give it to him any day of the week, right? He should be kept somewhere else and do something different. So I think we'll see some things that are very obvious, but I think we'll see some other things that are very interesting with AI and predictions on how the development model changes with it. So where is testing going? I'm not sure. I do think that the human element is actually going to get more important as we go through that. That would be a prediction I'm willing to bet on, because nobody really knows if AI is doing the right thing, because AI is there to solve a problem that we can't solve easily. It's a non-finite, non-discrete problem. That's why we use AI to solve a problem. So in order to know if it did it right, you have to have people that are really in touch and really aware and really down in the details to know if it's doing the right thing. And I think that the importance of the decisions that we're going to be making with AI is only going to go up. And so the importance of the people watching it is going to be even higher as well. What do you think, Adam?
Well, I mean, the two aspects. I think one is in terms of testing where things are going. There's lots of things, lots of possibilities. If we focus on AI as which I do think is going to be a major change in the industry, and it's already changing. If you look at a lot of the tools we have today, including some of the stuff we do, I agree with you. You have to, if you say AI right now to get someone to stop at your booth and to give it a second glance, much of the AI I've seen is mostly around very, very small degrees of tuning of what were previously algorithms. So whether it's playback speeds or image recognition, some of the visual testing stuff. But for the most part, it's taking something that we know and has a finite and taking feedback and trying to optimize it without a human having to do all that manual optimization. But they're scratching the surface, and it really isn't AI. It might be machine learning. In some cases, it's just algorithms dressed up as machine learning. It isn't even that. It's not self-learning. It's just
and chatbots.
Yeah, or chat parameters, right? Pattern recognition. It's pattern recognition and algorithms. I mean, it's funny. AI is something I've had my entire life because I remember when I was 11, we did our first. Oh my God, we were in secondary school in Great Britain, and they redone the curriculum that year. They said, well, you know, you're doing first year computer science in secondary school. Why don't we do AI? So I, wow. So they threw out all the usual stuff they normally taught, and they just learned Prolog and Lisp. And we did some basic, very, very basic AI around decision trees and stuff. And I was like, wow, this is pretty wild. And then the next year they threw all out. And we went back to doing C#, C++, and regular stuff. But I've always been very much aware that there was this promise of AI, and for 20 years it's been a promise. And then it does seem now with large data and what Google's been doing, a lot of these deep learning companies, they're able to really go into data and find patterns and have it self-learn on the development side. On the testing side, I don't see where we've really caught up with that. The danger is exactly what you said. We have these potential neural networks that are autonomously learning based on what they see in the pattern. How do you measure that? How do you know what it's doing? How do you know what the edge cases are? How do you know when it even hits the edge? If you build, and I think general purpose AI is quite a ways away, but even special purpose AI can easily make decisions that we don't feel are desirable. Insurance companies denying coverage because of some factors it found that are illegal, but maybe it determined relevant. So for test automation, I think what you'll see, hopefully, some of the manual tedium could be replaced by a computer-assisted automation. So you're not manually going into Selenium and taking XPath and CSS and doing all this
please
horrible.
Just give us that.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, the reason that's interesting is our automation tool guys were looking at someone, and they were looking at someone doing testing of an app. You know, click around. I as a human use the app like a human would use this app because it's built for a human. And then you do automation. You say, well, no, make a human be a robot. Go into the browser, hit F12, do all this crazy cut and paste of locators and like, my God, this is ridiculous. This is what machines do very, very well. It's an automated, predictable process. It isn't really AI. It's just predictable finding things. The problem is if you could make it adapt to the app, which is changing at the speed of DevOps. Every 2 weeks you got a new version of the app, which changes everything. Could you make the app aware enough to know what's a significant change versus what's an insignificant change and be able to adapt? If we can get there, now your test maintenance becomes manageable. So computer-assisted automation could be really useful. The other thing I think, which you alluded to, is in the sort of test management requirements and risk management, there's so much data in the products we run, but no one's looking at that. People look at the same metrics they looked at 20 years ago when it was on whiteboards and spreadsheets. Test coverage, you know, number of times a bug gets reopened, but no one's looking at all those data points together.
Right.
You know, that John checked in that line of code in Git, or every time John commits a line of code in Git, it breaks 5 tests. And so how can we tie that metric back? Is that line of code an important line of code? What's the risk of that line of code breaking? Is it a critical function that's being used by 4,000 other methods, or is it a line of code that is used by one method? So imagine to all that detailed knowledge of your code base, like you can do for static code analysis already, but do it dynamically on the business requirements down into all the metrics you're getting from the teams and for the automation. And the system will tell you, here's what you should do, or here's some things you could look at, basically diagnostics that humans can then use to improve how the team is working. I don't know.
I like it.
Arlene, thanks for your flexibility on that one, since I gave them a lot of leeway, but I hope that answered your question.
I've had fun. I hope Arlene did too. Did you have fun, Adam? That was a fun question.
That's a fun
Arlene's a
question.
good sport,
Yeah.
and she has good questions. Yes, it's great.
Is that Arlene in Wisconsin, by the way? Is it Wisconsin? Is that right? I think I know who Arlene is. It sounds familiar. Anyway.
But we did have a guest whose wife was from Janesville, Wisconsin recently. So,
Okay.
you know,
All right.
there is a connection there. It's just several degrees from Arlene.
Wyoming, she says.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
Arlene.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, Arlene. This is from Andrew Bay. How do you feel about the idea of whole team testing? Adam, do you want to start on this one?
I must admit, I saw this in the questions you sent ahead of time. I'm not familiar with the term, if it's a specific term. I understand the idea of the whole team, the whole agile team testing. So hopefully that's what it means. I don't know if I'm not familiar with if there's a specific methodology around it. In an agile team and in teams in general, testing is always better if you have the whole team testing. That doesn't mean the whole team is testing the same way. Well, the person who wrote the requirements with the client needs to test those requirements. Someone else, whatever you code yourself, someone else should test it. Didn't write the code before you give it to them. You should be testing your own code before it's even into anything beyond someone else looking at it. Someone should be looking at the performance. Everyone has a different skill they bring to bear. So the whole team is always should be testing. You don't want, I develop code, I don't know if it even compiles. Let me give it to you. You compile it. Oh,
that's what we used to do.
The whole team compiling. Can you imagine that? Like, wow, whole team compiling. Well, that's what the CI did, right? I'll give you, like in the old days, it was like, here's a batch card. Give it to the guy who did the batch process and it would come out the next day. No, it didn't compile. Come back tomorrow. We've kind of evolved from that mainframe. So I think, yeah, whole team development, whole team integration, that's what CI and continuous development is done, and testing should be the same thing. We should all be doing it. Doesn't mean we're all doing the same thing. So yeah, I think it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, Lisa Crispin talks a lot about whole team testing in the agile world. And so I imagine that's kind of where that's getting back to. And, my perspective is that I think it's wonderful to have more people with eyes on testing and more sense of ownership over quality. Because really testers most of the time can't change the quality of the code base, right? They can't go in and change the code to do anything about it. So that's a pretty difficult spot to be in, but developers can. So if they can recognize quality earlier on, that's very helpful. I do think though that specialization exists for a reason. And one of the things that I see happen over the last 20 years, or I've seen happen over the last 20 years with the development of agile methodologies, is that we've tried very hard to make everyone generalists sometimes, and we've tried to say, okay, let's make testers into developers, let's make developers into testers, let's make anybody can be the scrum master, and those, I think it's wonderful to have cross training. I think it's wonderful to get different experiences and exposure to different perspectives. All those things are absolutely wonderful, and they make you a better person, they make you a more wholesome person, they make you more able to interact with more people and communicate better. All those things are wonderful, and they create a better software product. However, I think that people have gifts and blessings, things that they're born with, that they have likes and dislikes, and those things lead us into certain professions, certain practices that we like, and I think specialization comes from that, and there's a certain value in specialization as well. So the idea that you mentioned, Adam, I've said many times myself, which is, look, it's really difficult to have your developer hat on over here. It looks a little bit like a dunce hat if you can see me, the scotch is starting to kick in. But but I think you look at, and I didn't mean developers are dunces. That was just what my hands were. That's not at all what I meant. There's too much scotch already. Oh no, stop. Danger, Will Robinson. Anyway, I think that you have developers who are over here, and it's really easy to get the blinders on as a developer and to look exactly at that algorithm in one particular way. And you really do have to almost have a separate brain to look at it in a different way and to see the problems there. It's a lot like proofreading. So I used to write a lot in college. I started out in English and with a focus on writing. And I would have a paper, and I learned very quickly that I couldn't proofread it right after I did it. I either had to hand it over to somebody else because I wouldn't see the mistakes, someone else would, or I had to wait 24 hours until it was almost like a new day and my brain had reset and I could go and look at it in a different way. So yeah, I think there's specialization as a part of that, and there are goods and bad things about that. And generalization, there are good and bad things about that. Cross training, whole team testing can be really, really helpful and productive. But I think every context is different, and it's important to know who's on your team, what their gifts are, and where your team wants to go, and using that with a particular practice in order to get where you want to go.
Great. Adam, do you want to add anything to that?
Just that when you have specializations, I think those people, so if I'm a performance guru at amazing performance, I don't want to be the bottleneck. I shouldn't be the only one thinking about performance. I might be doing 70% of the performance testing. The other 30% of my time, I should be teaching every other person on the team what they can do to look at performance before it even comes to me. I think that's true for every specialization. If it's usability, if it's security, whatever the skill you have. I mean, usability is a design skills. If someone's going to make this thing usable, and oftentimes we had a developer who wanted everything in plaid, literally striped plaid UI. It was the most ugly thing on earth. And so, you know, someone had to get, some people don't have gifts, and it's like you have to have that balance. And even here, he was like, but helping other people get to the point where you don't require that one UI person to make every single button or label on the system, because that isn't scalable either. So I think it's being the expert, but also training others, so everyone has a 30% degree, like cross-trained level of skill in many of the key things is really good.
Great. Well, let's take a moment to talk about our drinks, because Paul might need to take, have a refill.
Yeah, right. That's what I need, Jessica. I need a refill.
Paul, what are you drinking today?
Well, so I have tried a little bit of scotch, and in the last few years, and one of the things that happened was one really entertaining episode of Reflection as a Service, and then the other thing was at a STPCon, I sat around with Mark Tomlinson, who is a big scotch kind of person, and Mark introduced me to whatever he was drinking at the time, and I ended up somehow talking to Jason Huggins about how I wanted to be president someday, which I don't want to be. That is not of interest at all to me whatsoever. That's a job. That whole world is just, leave me be. But yeah, so scotch does funny things to me. But the short answer is Glenlivet. It's a 12-year scotch, and I'm trying this one out, and we'll see how it goes. So an old manager of mine used to drink it all the time, and I haven't really tried it and had the ability to taste different scotches until recently. So.
It seems like it's having the desired effect, so that's great.
If this is what you wanted, a Tipsy Paul for Tipsy Testing, you're doing it. Good job.
Always on our Fridays. Adam, how about you? You have created a special concoction today.
And this was in honor of Kirk Walton from 2 weeks ago now, and also Jessica, because they're Wisconsinites. Is that what's the official term?
Wisconsinite. Scotties.
Okay, right. So in
But he's not from Wisconsin. He's from Minnesota, so we'll have to get that drink next.
Right. So in Wisconsin, apparently, because I like old fashions, I've made them before, had them several times, but always a whiskey. And so I during that 2 weeks ago, they would challenge each other, because apparently in Wisconsin you use brandy. So I made a brandy old fashioned using some Courvoisier, and I used this what was a large, huge, round ice cube, but it's mostly melted, with oranges and some simple syrup, agave syrup, and some bitters, and it's very nice.
Nice.
Sounds delicious. I'm sorry that I didn't invite myself over to your house to do this from your yard, so you could have made one for me too.
Oh,
what about you, Jessica? You have one? You have a drink?
What you have?
I have the lamest drink on the planet. But it's in a cute glass. See, there are sloths.
Is that vodka?
Well, I don't know what those are actually. No, it's a rosé spritzer, because I have to drive the carpool tonight. So I couldn't get too crazy at 4:30 Eastern Standard Time. I have to wait until 8:30 Eastern Standard Time.
And so look, I've noticed, I read something just the other day that said a lot of people are drinking a lot during this COVID thing. And if you're an alcoholic or whatever, just turn the channel off. And I mean, we would rather you be safe than this, but the rest of us enjoy. So, but yeah, it's one of those things. Watch yourself, everybody. Stay safe out there. And it does concern me, all this inside isolation stuff. You gotta find a way to get together with people. And if this is it, and it works for you, that's great, but take care of yourselves.
Yeah, and get out as much as you can now, because cool weather will come and it will be harder.
Winter is coming.
Yeah, winter is coming. GOT. Yes. Okay, so to transition from our drinks back into questions, let's do one that is unrelated to testing. Let's talk about rock and roll, or bands in general. Tristan wants to know, if you had to be quarantined with one band, past or current, for the rest of the COVID era, which God knows how long that'll be, which band would it be and why? Paul, do you want to start with this one?
Sure. So I got a little preview of this question, so I've had a little bit of time to think about it. You know, I thought first about Metallica. I thought that would be fun, but James, as we were just talking about alcohol concerns, and James is an alcoholic, and so I wouldn't feel comfortable drinking around him. So maybe that's not the best thing. And Lars, I don't know if I could handle like Lars' hair in the drain all the time. If there's, you know, and it might be a little bit noisy. And then I thought about the Beatles. The Beatles would be really cool, but I can't imagine, you know, trying to get along with John and Paul. I have a feeling that the two of them probably would. I think George would be fun and Ringo would be fun. And I think it'd be very interesting to talk to John from time to time, and very interesting to hang out with Paul and try to harmonize with him or something. But so I'm going to be totally corny and say that I have a band here already, and they make a lot of noise. It's my kids, and they bang on all kinds of stuff and make noise, and we've been good so far, and they're my favorite band. And if the Foo Fighters show up, I'll trade them out, but for the most part, it's my kids and my wife.
How old are your kids?
They're 2, 5, and 7.
Well, that will keep the noise level up there, won't it?
Oh.
Yeah.
Speaking of little kids and the Foo Fighters, have you happened to see that little girl? I think her name is Nandi Bushell, who is, I think she's from Great Britain. She's 9 years old, and she is a master drummer. So she challenged Dave Grohl to a drum off, and he accepted.
Oh,
So
wow, awesome.
look it up on Twitter. It's her doing, I can't remember the name of the song. And then he comes back with it, and then he writes her a song.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's nice.
That's cool.
And you would not believe this little kid. She's a prodigy. I mean, her drumming. You have to go look it up after this.
I'll have to, absolutely. That's
Nandi
great.
Bushell.
Thanks for
And
sharing
Foo
that.
Fighters would also be a great choice. If you didn't have a 2, 5, and a 7-year-old, I definitely would go with the Foo Fighters. Adam, what about you? That's not generally your genre.
Yeah, and I was thinking, I'm actually normally an EDM person, an electronic person, but the problem with EDM is every single song is almost a different band. There aren't many that go on and on and on. But I was thinking actually from back to the 80s, because I'm an 80s child, and what would be a fun band to have in your house if you didn't mind the house not necessarily remaining intact? I have to say, I kind of like the idea of having Twisted Sister come around the house, because
Oh my God.
you wouldn't miss, the lockdown wouldn't feel so long and boring. They'll probably need a lot of drywall replaced afterwards, at least if you watch the videos of 2 of their songs. I thought, wow, that would be kind of fun. So for short-term quarantines, I think Twisted Sister would be my vote these days.
In their prime, though, not now.
I'm sorry, in their prime.
This is all, yeah, okay.
Time machine, the hot tub time machine,
Yeah.
we bring them back.
All right,
Right.
nice.
Yes.
I
And
think
Jessica, how about you?
your house is perfect for Twisted Sister too, because they were just, tall people and all that big hair, and you've got all those windows. So what a spectacle as people were driving by to see Twisted Sister through your windows, especially at night.
The glass is kind of expensive. They like smash out the glass.
Well, you did say if you didn't care about your house being intact.
That's true. Yeah, that was the problem. Yeah, so that's a good point. If I didn't mind all the glass being shattered to pieces, it would be amazing.
It would be like Nashville, where you can walk down the street and all the windows are wide open to the bands inside.
Mm-hmm.
I bet your neighbors wouldn't get as much of a kick out of it, though.
That's okay. We've got no homeowner association, so we're good.
Okay.
Nice. All right.
My neighbor's a cop. I'll just pay him off.
Oh,
Just kidding. Just kidding.
cut that, Simon.
Yep, we're gonna edit that out of the final draft.
Okay. Let's get back to some more serious questions here. Erica Chestnut wants to know, what is the one piece of advice you would give QA leaders during these unprecedented times? So this is a little bit like what should testers be doing, but you could take this maybe a different direction.
Yeah.
Adam, you want to start? Oh, Paul,
yeah,
go ahead. No, Paul, go ahead.
So Erica, hi. Erica is speaking at Star West in, I think it's October. She'll be doing a keynote, and she's someone whose voice is relatively new to the testing community, and I think she has a very strong one. So make sure to follow her on Twitter and look for her on LinkedIn and all that. She's got some great thoughts. I met her at a conference a couple years ago, and one of the coolest people I think I've met. And I've met a lot of really cool people too. But anyway, what would my advice be to leaders during these times? I guess the number one thing is the people. So to me, the people are what matter the most. And I feel like I think that you never know what somebody's going through, and that's just every day, whether there's COVID or not. You have no idea what's going on in their life, what's going on in their world, and many times the people with the most going on just don't say anything. They just look like nothing else is going on. So I think patience and tolerance and understanding are things that we can all go a little bit farther with these days, and understanding that we don't know the whole story in somebody's house. We don't know the whole story of when they're working from, maybe, and the hours that they're working. So trying to be more understanding with testing specifically, though, which is much more fun. And I'm sorry to get so deep down on these things, but with testing, I don't really know how COVID affects testing. I mean, I guess a couple of the things are it's got to be tough on leaders right now, and testing leaders and development leaders and any leader within business, because you're trying to support your people. I think, we've done a lot of remote work over the years. So just remember to check in on your people, I would say, is one thing. Check in with them visually as much as it makes sense. Understand that not everybody wants to be on video all the time. Understand that I'm hearing again and again, people are sick of these things. They're sick of GoToMeeting. They're sick of WebEx. They're sick of all of it. They're exhausted with it. So maybe there are other ways to do things. Maybe pick up, a lot of people don't know that these things actually you can make phone calls with them as well. So maybe just a speakerphone conversation sometime, instead of being in front of a computer. Maybe somebody can change where they are or where they take a call. So I think there's flexibility, understanding, all those kinds of things are what I would say. And none of that's really related to testing, but I think it's going to make your testing better when your people are taken care of.
Adam?
I agree, and I agree with everything that Paul said, 110%. I'm not a QA leader. I help lead the company. So, and we have people under us who do QA. So I'll sort of take it from a general management and people standpoint, as well as looking after people in terms of their, the time. I guess making sure they have time off and rest. One of the problems I found is also sometimes people don't know that they need to take time off. We have some people in our company who probably are workaholics. I'm probably one of them, but there's other people. And I'll be on Google Chat and I'll see the little green circle, and it's like 2 in the morning. I'm up, and then the green circle, the other person's like, oh no, this is bad. So I think it's also being mindful that not only people may not realize they need to shut down, or so some hammer as well. Like, you need to take a vacation. It needs to be next week, and you need to do it. And if you do it, we don't want to hear from you. And if we hear from you, we're going to shut off your VPN.
Yeah, the boundaries aren't there right now for a lot of people. And this was something that I had to adjust to when I started working remotely many years ago, was trying to figure out when I was going to work and when I wasn't going to work. And there were some things that really didn't work for me, right? So if I took a break and I wanted to go play with my Xbox, at the time it was an Xbox, there wasn't like a million different versions of Xbox, but if I wanted to go play Xbox for a few minutes, it might not be a few minutes after a while, right? Like, it might last a little bit too long. So I think you have to know yourself, and not everybody is mature enough to know where their boundaries are. I'd suggest just setting some hard and fast rules, trying to work in a place that's different from the place that you sleep or the place that you eat, if possible. And not everybody has that option, but have a dedicated workspace. Figure out how to make a transition between work and home. Is there something you can do? And it can be as little as putting a hat on when you're working and taking it off when you're not working. It might be something like changing clothes. I know for me, that's a major change for me. When I change clothes, I feel like a different person in the afternoon, right? Take a walk if you can, if it's a nice sunny day, make that your commute. So where are those boundaries going to be, and stick to them, and just don't let it happen. So I'm with you. Find boundaries on your time. I think it makes you more healthy, and you use your time more effectively when you do that.
And I think as a leader, sometimes even people who are experienced, I mean, sometimes they'll need a push from other people. We all need a push sometimes. And so it's not just a matter of letting people say, do whatever you want, whenever you want. It's like, well, actually, I think that isn't working for you right now. You can't see it, but we can see it. And so I think it's a little bit of that.
I think that's great.
Great. We have a couple of technical questions too. I think we'll go to those next. We have, sorry, I lost it in my list. Violetta. Hi, Violetta. Wants to know which steps should be done in an organization to start test automation.
Well, that's a great question. That's a great question. So I would suggest the first one is, for me, would be to identify what the need is for test automation. So many times I work with clients who want to do test automation because they want to do test automation because they want to do test automation. It's like turtles all the way down, right? Like there's no why there. So why do you want to do test automation? And then try to take that to a few different people in your organization and make sure that that's something that everybody's on board with and whatever else. So number one, I like to know my why, and I like for my clients to know my why, their why before we start. The second thing is taking a look at what you have. So what are the resources that I have in place? What are my skills on my team? What are the personalities on my team? What types of experiences do I have on my team? And then I guess third, what support do I have across the organization? Is this something that the organization is ready for? A lot of times I get calls from people who are individual contributors that want to start doing test automation. And unfortunately, that's really a tough go of it when you don't have support from the rest of the organization. So finding ways to get people to collaborate on this, finding different levels of people that will help you, making sure you have air cover, in other words, the support that you need from folks that are higher up the food chain. Those are the main steps. Picking a tool is always people's number one thing. How do I pick a tool? That's the step that they want to start on. And I do think that that can be helpful. Certainly there are places where the organization just happens to be ready for test automation. And so because it happens to be ready, because you happen to have the skills that are necessary, because you happen to have the support around you, it happens to be time to pick a tool, and you pick a tool that works or doesn't work. So picking a tool is important. You definitely have to learn the skills related to test automation in order to make it work well, and you have to have a tool to learn those skills. So so that's an important step, but it's not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily have to be the first one. So if you're in a place where everything's ready to go, everything's teed up, and you happen to see that and you've got all the support you need, and it's time to pick a tool, then go for it. But otherwise, those other things are there. So I think there are pieces of this like training. So these steps may not happen in order. Training can be a very helpful piece of that. And I'm not just saying that because I sell it. I'm saying that also because I believe it, and I sell it because I believe it. So training is a very, very helpful tool for organizations to move forward together and to get people walking in the same direction. So with training, what we normally find is that it's not always the material that's the most important. It's the people getting together, having similar mindsets and walking forward together, having the same vocabulary, having the same approach, having the same thinking, having had the same conversations together, and the experience together of training can really move organizations forward. So those are some of the keys. And then after that, learning from your mistakes. So the next step would be just trying things and iterating on it. That's how we're doing a lot of our development these days. Software test automation is much the same. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to try things that work. Do not be afraid to throw something away. Do not be afraid to throw a test away. Do not be afraid to throw code away. You can sometimes learn much more by throwing something away, writing it again in a better way than by trying to stick with something that just kind of sort of works. On the other hand, many times there's great stuff that's there that people have written before you, and we should respect the amount of time that they put into it and the brain power and everything else that they did there. So that's where I would start. I hope that answers the question. What are your thoughts?
So the question is really around how you prepare an organization for automation. And part of the problem is usually, often anyway, the person who's decided that we do automation, like Paul said, is they've gone to a conference, like one of the ones we talked about, and they've seen a tool, a shiny tool, like one of our, maybe our tool, maybe a competitor's tool, maybe an open source tool, or they've seen a case study of someone doing some amazing things, and they say to the team, we have to do automation, this is what the future is, go do it. And there's no metrics, there's no measure of success, there's no way of measuring and quantifying, do we succeed and how do we succeed? And that's the worst way to prepare an organization. So if we look at the alternative, would be, what are you doing today? First of all, is there any automation? Let's assume there's no automation. They've never done it before. It's a brand new site. The first thing you should really ask, as I said, is not only just why are you doing automation, but what is the return on investment for doing it? What is the metrics you'll know that what you have done? And the other thing I'm always a big fan of is how are you going to make sure that this can be supported by the organization, that you don't end up becoming this expert, the only person? So, for example, actually, interestingly, my son works for a large defense, unnamed defense contractor in this area, and he did it for some internship. And they picked a commercial tool, which is a very good tool, and it's working well for them. The problem is that most of the people who work in that organization are aerospace people, not software people. And so my son, who's an intern over the summer, at the end of the 3 months, and during COVID, he worked remotely from our house. He's like, they're like, well, it's amazing what you've done, but the problem is no one understands what you've done. So for him, it's been really good because he's now working 10 hours a week for this defense contractor while he's a student getting paid. Like, this is good. But if I was at that company, I'm like, well, this is very dangerous. Our entire business is predicated on an intern for 10 hours a week. We can't support this automation. And the danger will be is if no one else can pick it up, when he works somewhere else or does something else, they're going to have no way of supporting it. It's all going to be thrown away. So you have to plan the obsolescence of your people before you start doing anything. How are you going to exit that person? Because they don't want to do this. They don't want to be doing this thing for 20 years. They want to learn new things themselves. So that's the key, I think, a key.
Wow, that's really interesting. Avinash wants to know, how do you organize the test case documentation for each release? So is that without having the kind of data in front of you, can you talk about how you might organize test cases or test case documentation? Why don't you start, Adam?
I have a very simple one-word answer for this one. It's total promotion. Just use Spyro Test from Inflectra. That's what it does. And I'm actually semi-serious that if you have, if you need to produce release notes with a lot of detail, anytime you need to do any kind of reporting, you should look at what you need to get out, figure out where the data come from, build it, have some tool, open source, whether you buy a tool like ours or you build something in Google Sheets or whatever you do, build an automated process to get the report you need out from the stuff you're doing every day. Don't do what a lot of people do, which is have all this stuff, we do all this work, we do all these bugs, all these requirements, and then someone needs release notes. Then we do this heroic effort to pull them all together into a document, and we forget how we did it. And then 3 months later, we do the same thing again. So, choose whatever tools and stuff you have so you can repeatedly do this if you need to do it more than once. If it's a one-time thing, fine, figure out how to make it. But once you have to do something repeatedly, figure out a painless way to get that data and manage that data, and don't just simply try and grab documents and cut and paste, midnight.
I have nothing to add. That was perfect. I totally agree.
So what you're both saying is use Spyro.
That's what we're saying. And actually, and in all seriousness, we do a lot of life science work, and in life sciences, you have to be audited by an external auditor, and they schedule a whole day with us to do a desk audit. And they used to be using some tools like that don't do all the traceability stuff, and they have all these spreadsheets. We did the whole audit in 2 hours because I was able to show, well, here's our requirements, and here's all the tests, and here's the bugs, here's the release notes, here's the code. And he's like, wow, it's all organized. And it's like, what? We use our own tool because that's the value we celebrate, how it brings to people. But for us, it cut an 8-hour audit down to 2 hours. Just made it so much easier. We can find everything in minutes.
I find that it's really difficult for people to understand different contexts with this, right? So you've got someone who's in a highly regulated industry, and if they're in banking or if they're in healthcare, if they're in pharmaceuticals, if they're in any of these highly regulated areas, insurance, they're going to be audited. They have to know that they can get the right documentation at the right place, that they understand all of the actions that happened along the course of the development project. That's a very different experience than someone who's in a startup where they've got a website that's doing one app and there's no regulation whatsoever. Those are two very, very different worlds. And certainly there are things that we can learn from the startup world or an agile world or whatever else that we can bring into one that's more highly regulated. And there are things that we can learn from the other and bring back into this. So the idea of automating documentation, that's a step that I think a lot of folks in a dare I say, faster paced environment, that not all regulatory environments are slower, but it tends to be the case. But we can certainly learn that. And if we could automatically document some of these things, that can be helpful for a lot of companies that aren't in a highly regulated area. Yeah.
And I would even say, Paul, with the European Union's move towards data privacy and the GDPR, even if you're a startup, once a user from Europe touches your website, you're going to suddenly realize you need a lot more tracking than you think.
You do. It's a nightmare. And the thing is that yeah, I could get into this. So just running a small business and trying to do marketing and trying to take people's information, we have to be very cognizant. Are they in the European Union? Are they in California? And so people ask me all the time, well, why do you take all this information when I register for a webinar, like on our beaufortclaremont.com/webinars page? Why do you take all this information? Well, you know, because of these regulations, I have to make sure that if you're in the European Union, I follow certain guidelines. And if you're in California, I follow certain guidelines, and other people different ways. And it runs into all these different problems and things that you have to work through. There's a high amount of work that folks have to do these things, and certainly a tool that could do much of the reporting for you and create that audit track for you would be very, very helpful.
Great. How has having to work remotely and not be near the development team changed testing? And is it for the better or for the worse?
I don't know
Adam,
the
you
answer
want
to
to?
that.
Oh,
What do you think,
Paul.
Adam?
Oh,
Sorry, say that again. I missed what you said. Sorry.
So I said I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what the answer is.
That's an interesting question, because I'm not sure that's even true, because before COVID, you had companies where the entire team was together, an agile team with testers, developers all integrated. You've had people where you're in one floor in one building, but the testing team had that room and you had that room. Then you have outsourced QA teams where you have these massive apps that they get sent overnight to another country with all these bugs to fix and bug tests to run, test scripts, and it comes back the next day. That was all before COVID. So I don't know if COVID per se makes people more remote. The irony actually is it can be the opposite. We actually have developers in Eastern Europe who work on one of our tools, and before COVID, we had meetings in the office and they had meetings in their kind of where they were, and we would occasionally get together. Now we do everything like on these video calls. It's actually made us closer to them. So I don't know if that's true. I think definitely you should be as close to your developers as testers and work together as much as possible on whatever tools, whether that's in person, whether it's remote, whether it's voice, audio, if it's playing Xbox, if it's playing Xbox together to break down the barriers, whatever works for you, I think is a good thing. So I don't know if it's, I would agree that COVID has made it worse. Maybe it has, but it may have made it better. And it certainly, I think, made us think about it more, which is a good thing.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I don't know. I was a freelance person working remotely for a lot of years before Beaufort Claremont was different. We were kind of building things and working with other companies more so than just my freelance work. And during that time, I found that my understanding of time was much different than other people's, right? So you're sitting in your home office and you're working and you need something. You can't see that the person that you asked is actually on the phone with somebody else, right? You can't see, and I keep talking about phones like I'm 120 years old or something, but you can't see what they're doing, that they're in a conversation with somebody else, that they're in a meeting or whatever. So your concept of time is different, your interest in what they're doing is different, your ability to ask for something and be patient is different. That was very different. The idea that you could just be off on an island when you were remote and everybody else was in an office. And because they don't see you, they don't think of you. They don't even think of what you represent. So if you're a tester, you represent testing, right? Right across your head, it says testing to them. When they see you, it's testing. So if they see you, they probably start thinking about testing, and then maybe they have a conversation with you about testing or something that's related to that. If you're not there every day, if you're not seeing them every day, that's not there. So I think I'm with Adam. I think in some ways there's a lot of things we can learn from this. A lot of and maybe we're getting together more with some of the remote folks than we were before. So,
yeah, I think that's definitely true. You know, with the guys in Eastern Europe, I feel like I'm getting to know them more than we ever did before.
Right, 6 months
But
ago.
they're
Right.
also, you know, just it's probably different if you're freelance because you're working with different people all the time. I find that I definitely miss the water cooler aspect of the office, or being able to just stick your head in. You know, it's nice to be able to roll out of bed and not have to worry about getting ready for work so much, but to go into the office and have those personal connections, or so how are you today? Or wait, I just have this, Simon, can you answer this quick question on X? You know, that we don't have that anymore. So interestingly, I'm getting more time with the guys in Eastern Europe, but I hardly ever talk to Simon anymore. And
That's
he lives
true.
down the street. So
Yeah, he's in
it's,
Silver Spring, literally, and right,
yeah,
and you're doing, did you go to school near where his house is at one point? In
yeah,
Northwood? Yeah.
yeah. So it does, you know, I think if you're used to the environment, it it does have a little more of an impact having everyone separated, but it can have the opposite effect if everyone's already been separated. So
Mhm.
there maybe isn't a better or a worse,
Just different.
just
Something to
different,
be
right?
gained out of each, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're at 5 o'clock, but there's one more thing that I wanted to talk about, because Paul had brought it up earlier, actually, and it is something that he's been asking. As part of your role, Paul, right? You're staffing, you're interviewing people, and one of the interview questions is, how do you deal with slow running automated test cases? And the answers you get are different than what you thought. So the idea was perhaps maybe you should change the question. Can you talk a little bit about that whole situation?
Sure. Yeah. So this was just interesting to me. So absolutely, we've moved more into staffing and permanent placement for IT positions. And so if that's something you need, we'd love to help you out with that. We found that our customers really like it when we do that. So we're going to do more of it. And we're having success with it. And doing that, it means that I'm having a lot more conversations with people. I'm doing a lot more interviewing. I've always done a lot of interviewing over the course of the last 20 years. It's something I enjoy. I like getting to know people. But one of the questions that I asked early on with people, especially for test automation positions, was about slow running tests. How do you deal with slow running tests? And that's a very open-ended, broad, vague question. And I understand that it's open-ended and very broad and very vague. However, the answers that I was getting was very closed and very narrow. In fact, a lot of times I would get the same answer repeatedly, which is check your locators. I would check my locators. And so there's a lot of assumptions in that answer, right? So I didn't seed the answer. I didn't frame the question to be about Selenium, about anything else. And test automation for me and for our folks at Beaufort Fairmont is about a lot of different things. There's all types of test automation, not just at the UI level, not just the API level. There are many other ways to go about test automation and cool things you can do with it and problems you can solve. So when I hear an answer like, well, you check the locators, my first response is, that's interesting. I keep getting that answer a lot. So I put it out on Twitter and I'm like, what's going on? And what I found was there were a lot of people who were like, you know what, I want a much more closed question. And okay, if you're in Selenium and using WebDriver in JavaScript and you have a slow running test, which means that it's one standard deviation apart from the typical average test running time, and and all these very narrow things, and those are perfectly fine questions if I want the answer to what is the exact solution for this exact problem. But my question wasn't about that. My question was about learning about the other person and figuring out where they're going. So if they make the assumption and they say, I would check the locators, then I know from my experience, okay, they're talking about something that uses the internals of the website in order to know what's going on with it. And they have had the experience that locators can cause a slow running test. And that is one of the things that could happen. And that's the one that comes to mind. That gives me a lot of things to work with, right? I can say, hey, well, tell me more about Selenium. Where does that go? Tell me more about locators. Why do locators have anything to do with timing? What did you assume timing was? How did you think the timing? So another person out there said, well, I would ask, what does slow mean? I think that's a perfectly reasonable question. Absolutely come back with me at that, right? That's great. That's more of like a context-driven type of question. So what does slow mean to you? That's a perfectly good retort to me for my question. And it leads us down another path, right? So for me, the question was about opening doors and figuring out where the person was coming from and trying to learn from it, and trying to find a place where we could communicate in such a way that your experience is shown to me and we can have a conversation to figure out where your experience could go one day and does it match up with the client. That's where I'm trying to get and why I want an open-ended question. And at the point in my career and in my life where I am, I feel much more comfortable asking those types of questions and getting answers. And of course, that's not the first question I ask, and there's a lot of context on Twitter that's just not there. So, I start out, how are you today? Let's just softballs, right? How are you today? Was there anything special that happened to you today? Did you get on the meeting well, right? How are you feeling about this conversation? Tell me about yourself. All the things to make somebody feel comfortable so that when we come to a more difficult question, we're ready for it, we're more confident, and they can show me the very best of what they have. And that's what I want to do for my clients, is find the people who are the very best that they can be. I want to figure out what their lid is more so than their floor. I don't want to trap them into things on one specific answer or whatever. But Ashley on Twitter, if you find that Twitter stream, Ashley had a really wonderful article that she wrote after that. I don't remember Ashley's last name right now, but if you find that on my Twitter page, she wrote up a beautiful blog post about the technical aspects of this. So I didn't even have to talk about it, which was nice. But you know, my approach to interviewing and my approach to finding people for roles is that it's not about my values, it's not about what I want, it's sort of about what the client wants. And it's not about my experience in the way that I view the way the testing should be, it's about what the client wants and about what the candidate can deliver. And so I'm looking for the best of all of that, and I'm asking open-ended questions to the client as well to try to figure out what is it you're actually after, what are the parameters of that, and how can we explore that more so that I can get you the very best person. So anyway, that I thought that was a really fun question, and if you guys have comments about it, I'd love to hear. But sometimes there are open-ended questions that I want to ask, and sometimes there are closed ones, and that one was just strange because I kept getting back the same answer, which was, well, I'd look at the locators. Well, what about the application? What about the infrastructure? What about the, you know, what about the person running the test case? What about the sleeps you put in there? I don't know. Like, let's talk, right? So.
Right. Adam, do you have thoughts on?
One thing, I mean, there are definitely, I mean, there are definitely people who are afraid of open-ended questions. So and there are concrete thinkers and abstract thinkers, and so depending on the role you're looking for, some people might be utterly, I know some people in my office will be utterly terrified with that question. And like on this kind of this show, you know, we have a lot of these questions that people throw to us at before the meeting starts, and I like that kind of stuff. Like, oh yeah, so I have to think about it on the fly. But so there's a skill that goes with that. So depending on the role you're looking for, some people will probably use those questions, I suspect, as a filter, because if you're in a sales role, you have to be comfortable with open-ended questions because that's what you're actually doing, is trying to get the client to open up and you have to open up. If you're dealing with someone who's a very technical, you know, performance engineer, you may want someone who's much more of a concrete thinker. And so I guess it's just, I always remember some of those interviewers.
And this was a senior role. This was a senior role, by the way, a senior automation engineer. And so an open-ended question for a senior person is different than for a junior person. So for a junior entry-level person, it's going to be very concrete. I'm going to make sure that we're looking for something very specific.
Right.
Yeah.
Because if it's their first job interview, they're going to run out screaming, "Oh my God, he asked a question, I don't know what he wanted."
Right.
I mean, and there are some high-tech companies, like, I mean, I haven't interviewed there, but like the Googles of the world, and they often will deliberately throw, you know, just crazy curveball questions right as you walk in, because they want to, that's what they do. I remember reading the book Uncanny Valley by Kate Weinberg. It's about Silicon Valley, and it's great. It's a fun read. And then she talks about some of these crazy questions that they didn't even care what you said. They didn't want the answers. It was just to make you uncomfortable, to prove that they were more important than you. So
right. I'm not good with that.
Yeah, I don't like that. If you're asking the question, it should be because you need something to know something from someone. You don't just throw questions out there just to prove you're superior. So I think
I'm with you.
Responsibility.
I'm with you.
Well, thank you very much, Paul. I think this was a great show. We had a lot of questions today, and you did an amazing job. I think with the scotch, without the scotch, you're an excellent guest.
Well, thank you.
And we're happy to start the weekend with you today.
Well, thank you. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you all so much for being online. And, you know, the least you can do, go take a look at Inflectra's site, right? Because they're providing the time for us. But I appreciate the opportunity, and it's so nice to talk to each of you and to be with everybody here today.
We look forward to seeing you at the next conference in person.
That's what I'm looking for. Yeah, SDBCon next year or whatever. Hopefully next year we'll have some in-person events we can see you at.
Whenever it happens, we'll get together.
That sounds great. We look forward to it.
All right. Thank you.
Have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Adam. And thanks, everyone, for coming.
Thanks, Jessica. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. Thanks, Jessica.